Welcome back, everyone, to the Language Models and Intelligent Agentic Systems course. Today, we're going to be talking about AI orgs and agendas. We're going to kind of go through the big AI companies, what they're working on, what they're thinking about, what their kind of goals are. And then we're going to take a broader look at various agendas, like research agendas people are thinking about, and the different companies that are working on these different agendas. And we'll also take a look at the various government organizations that are also getting much more involved in the AI space. So last lecture, we were looking at AI control and safety cases. And so we saw how we can decompose the probability of near-term catastrophic incidents and identify this P incident given misaligned term and focus on reducing that. And we do this with control protocols, which use careful application of humans and models to verify untrusted model outputs are safe, or to make model outputs less likely to contain harmful defects in them, like a backdoor in a programming problem. And the kind of core of these control protocols are really based on monitoring, editing, and auditing these model outputs. And you often get this trade-off between your usefulness, so how much you degrade a aligned model in doing its task, versus safety, how much your ability to sort of catch if your model is misaligned. And sometimes you even trade off against cost as well, like with the resampling. And finally, we saw safety cases and how they allow us to be confident that a model is going to be safe when it's deployed within a given context. And this could include the application of control protocols. Okay, so today I'm just going to start with a sort of brief overview of the landscape, then talk about the main companies, then the main government groups, and then a sort of mix of agendas and smaller organizations. Okay, so there's this great map at aisafety.com/map that contains a much wider range of organizations than I'm going to talk about today, also covering resources for upskilling or careers advice or podcasts or all sorts of stuff. So I'd highly recommend people to check this out and have a look at it if they're interested in digging deeper into the broader landscape in AI safety. Okay, another point I want to make early on is on AI spending. So we're going to see today that there are a large number of organizations that are dedicated to mitigating the risks of AI. However, the overall spending is still very skewed. So the overall investment in AI at the moment, I think, is on the order of about hundreds of billions of pounds. Certainly, the top labs will be investing the upper end of tens of billions of pounds in their current models and systems, maybe even beyond that. However, the spending on AI safety is kind of only really around the hundreds of millions of pounds mark. And it sounds like a lot of money, and it is in many ways a huge amount of money. However, I think that it's a little bit concerning that we're actually only spending about 1,000th of our kind of AI investment as a society on making these systems safe and reducing the risk in these systems. I'm certainly not advocating that we should be spending, say, half of it on safety, but maybe 100th or 1/10th might be a little bit better than just 1,000th. Okay. Yeah, so what about the big AI companies? What are they doing? I think the first one to talk about is OpenAI. And so these are a leading AI research company that were founded in 2015. They're currently a capped profit organization. They were originally non-profit. Earlier this year, I think they were trying to, or at least thinking about transitioning to for-profit. But as far as I'm aware, they've sort of abandoned those ideas and they're now staying as a capped profit organization. And they are the ones responsible for the GPT language models, for DALL-E. They do various multimodal AI systems. And they're really focusing on LLM reasoning. So their 01, 03, 04 models, they're really trying to use inference time compute to scale the abilities of their models. And I think overall their goals are sort of roughly creating superintelligence in order to benefit humanity. And this is maybe a charitable view of it. Maybe an uncharitable view is creating superintelligence to make lots of money. We'll see which of those turns out to be more accurate. And in terms of the sort of focus they have on safety, they do some work on prosaic alignment. So prosaic alignment is basically doing RLHF or sort of current data-driven approaches to AI alignment, and just trying to make those just like incrementally better, versus non-prosaic alignment, which would be trying something fundamentally novel and different. So mostly prosaic alignment focused. They also do a lot of red teaming work. They do lots of safety evals, and they have their like preparedness framework where they rank models on, to what extent can this model uplift somebody to make like a bioweapon, or to what extent can this model carry out cybersecurity tasks. Some of their recent publications, they published a paper on deliberative alignment. This is again sort of in line with this focus on LLM reasoning, and they showed that if you get a model to reason in its chain of thought about how the current actions it's taking are sort of in line with or going against its sort of constitution, its safety training, you can actually recover from a lot of like jailbreaks or failure modes where the AI is going off and doing something you maybe wouldn't want it to do. So this idea, you get the model to sort of like stop, think, is what it's doing safe, and if not, then sort of stop and try something else. They've also published a lot about the properties of their current system, so all their like system cards. And these are great if you want to find out, just how dangerous or capable these systems are at their various metrics that they lay out in their fairness framework. And they're also releasing a lot of different benchmarks for many different tasks. So Health Bench is like medical reasoning data set. BrowseComp, I think, is an agentic benchmark for models to like browse the web and carry out web tasks. And PaperBench, I think, is replicating papers, doing like AI R&D. So you have some paper on some new vision architecture. Can like an LLM agent sort of autonomously replicate the findings of this paper? So yeah, they're very much interested in models like pushing the frontier of capabilities and becoming more and more intelligent. Okay, next up we've got Google DeepMind. And so this is Google's sort of premier AI division. They merged with Google Brain a couple of years ago. And they're really interested in doing fundamental AI research and AI for science. So they've got their Gemini models. I think their sort of like main kind of like more sort of like landmark achievements are in things like AlphaFold and AlphaEvolve, where AlphaFold can predict how a set of sequence of proteins is going to fold up into some complex shape, which is very useful for predicting its biological properties. They have another similar model to this called AlphaProteo that does the inverse protein folding problem. So you say, oh, I want a protein that has this sort of shape, and AlphaProteo tries to figure out the exact sequence of amino acids you need to get that shape. And AlphaEvolve is a recent model that they announced. It is mostly just a lot of scaffolding around a large language model. And the idea of AlphaEvolve is that it can go out and it can solve maths problems where you have some numerical indicator of success. And so I think they proved a few, in my eyes, maybe fairly minor mathematical results. I think one of them is this like hexagon packing problem. So you have some number of hexagons and you want to arrange them in such a way so that you can draw another hexagon around them that's as small as possible. And AlphaEvolve, managed to do slightly better than the best human solution on this, and on a few other problems in a similar style. And so their goals really seem to be solving intelligence, but for the explicit purpose of scientific and mathematical discovery. They're really focused on science and maths. And their safety focus, they do, again, a little bit of like prosaic alignment stuff. They do a fair number of dangerous capability evals. They're doing some interpretability work that OpenAI are less interested in. They also have a lot of a large investment in security and a large ethos of security, even in Google, outside of Google DeepMind. And they also are trying to put more sort of guardrails on their models. And so in their recent publications, there was VO3 that came out very recently that I think is probably a landmark model in image generation. I think previous image and video generative models have maybe over-promised, under-delivered a little bit. You can still sort of look at them and tell it's like, oh, this is like an AI video. People are sort of like moving it a bit weird, even though they were like incredible achievements. But I think VO3 is maybe now actually starting to step over this line of generating very difficult to sort of distinguish from video that is very difficult to distinguish from real video. They also published a paper on a theoretical way you could mitigate reward hacking. So this sort of ties into some of the alignment and deeper sort of safety work that they're doing. So Mona is this way in which you can make your reinforcement learning system less myopic. No, more myopic. So it only cares about sort of like short-term reward and is doing less, trying to play like a very long horizon game, which might be might lead it more towards deceptive alignment or like long-term strategic behaviors that are a little more dangerous. They also released, I think a few months ago now, AI co-scientist, and this was quite incredible. They showed that they have this like system of LLMs, and together they can come up with new scientific ideas, brainstorm them, review them. I think even maybe start to test some of them. And they showed that actually their AI co-scientist model came up with some of the hypotheses and results that an actual team of scientists did. This actual team of scientists, it took them the course of a year, whereas their model did it very rapidly. This is really them starting to deliver on this goal of trying to advance scientific discovery with AI. Okay, moving on to Anthropic. This is an AI safety company founded by former OpenAI researchers in 2021. They weren't too happy with the direction OpenAI was going. They wanted more of a safety focus. And so they have the Claude language models. They're the ones who sort of pioneered constitutional AI, as I said before, like much more of a strong focus on safety. And they also care a lot about strong agentic capabilities. So whereas OpenAI models are more about the inference time reasoning, Anthropic are kind of less interested in this, and they're more interested in really good agentic scaffolds and getting their models to be able to do just lots of everyday, maybe more just low-hanging fruit, economically viable tasks. And so their rough goal is kind of build a safe, beneficial, and interpretable general AI systems. And their safety focus, they also do a lot of interpretability work, some prosaic alignment, again, a lot of red teaming. Most of the big labs do lots and lots of red teaming. They also think about the societal impacts of their work and have some publications on that. So recently, what have they been up to? Well, they published a paper on tracing the thoughts of an LLM. So, really taking this interpretability lens on things, this idea of if we look inside the models, we can understand what's going on. Let's not just treat them as a black box. And they showed that you could, get some good results here on how these models think. They also published a paper on alignment faking and showed that when you subject these models to, maybe adverse incentives and you sort of frame things a certain way around the model, it will pretend that it's aligned so that you don't update its weights. We explored this a lot in one of the previous lectures. And they also had this paper on constitutional classifiers. So they kind of worried about people jailbreaking their models, people misusing them, and so they tried to come up with this better method of defending against this class of jailbreaks that seemed to be able to work for a large number of models and very effective. That's Anthropic. Next up, Microsoft Research. Sorry. So Microsoft Research are the research division within Microsoft, and they've got a pretty strong AI focus, although they do work on other stuff. And they're within AI mostly focusing on sort of broad machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, integration with Microsoft products. And this is much more not quite sort of like classical AI systems, but I think AI systems of sort of 5-10 years ago, and just sort of carrying on with those trends. Much less of a focus on large language models and really pushing the limits of machine intelligence. And so they seem to mostly want to be able to advance AI research for practical applications and try and empower users. And they seem very industry focused. So trying to help people out in industry, do stuff, get stuff done, build them tools, this sort of thing. In terms of safety, they have somewhat of a focus on security. They're doing some guardrail stuff. They're also trying to build tools for governance to help people manage these models better. And they're also thinking a lot about risk management and minimizing risk out there in the real world in sort of today's climate. So some of their recent publications, there was one on trying to help industry computing researchers sort of assess and reduce the negative societal impacts of their work. They've also been thinking about large language models and tabular data. So again, this feels more like taking large language models but sort of applying them to more classical problems. And finally, they did an empirical study of issues in LLM training. So so some sense of trying to improve some of the issues with these modern AI systems. Okay, Meta. So this is Meta AI is Meta's AI research division. What a surprise! And this includes FAIR. So if you've heard of Facebook AI Research, they're probably the largest team in Meta AI. And they primarily create the open source llama models. They do some things in computer vision, and they also have this like metaverse AI stuff. But I think their main focus on these open source models. And they seem to be wanting to build AI for a little bit of scientific advancement, also maybe some social experiences stuff. Maybe they're also just trying to integrate this into their current products and sort of push forward that way. They're maybe less sort of ideologically and goal-driven than OpenAI, GDM, and Anthropic are. They do some safety work, so they do some dangerous capabilities evals, they do some red teaming, they have some guardrails with Llama Guard, so this looks like filtering model inputs and outputs, but really they don't do a whole lot here. So some of their recent publications, Llama 4 came out pretty recently, big multimodal open source language model. They also had a paper on this idea of like meta rewarding language models, so they are thinking a little bit about prosaic alignment and trying to improve the extent to which we can align these models. They also had a paper a while ago on tool usage for LLMs, and this was actually one of the precursors to LLM agents. They showed that you can very easily, with either few shot learning in context or fine tuning, get language models to use tools like web search and Python. Okay, finally, in the big companies, we've got DeepSeek. So this is a Chinese AI company that was founded in 2023, and they are somewhat of an emerging large language model competitor. So far, they have been developing competitive, open source, and cost-effective language models with strong reasoning capabilities. So like OpenAI, they're quite keen on model reasoning, but I think the sort of cost effectiveness and open source of their models is what differentiates them from the rest. It's not really clear what their goals are. DeepSeek kind of began as a bit of a spin-off project from a hedge fund manager, so it's not really sure where where DeepSeek will go in the future. Whether it will stay on this course of open source cost-effective models or whether it will change tracks to something different. They don't really seem to have anything with safety, no real guardrails, not much. They're not doing dangerous capability evals in their models. All they seem to really care about is just making their models powerful, making them strong, and publishing on them. Speaking of their publications, this is basically just the only things they really publish on are their models and like how they make them and the technical details, and they don't really go outside of this. Okay, any questions on any of these big orgs or how they relate to each other? Yeah.
I've always been confused how Meta intends to make them.
Yeah. I think the objective behind their open source models, I think, is probably to undermine the competitive moat that the other big labs have. So they probably see themselves as being unable to compete in terms of like having the best language models. And so they sort of think, well, okay, if we can't have the best language model, then if we make an open source one, we will hopefully really undercut our competitors, and it will mean that the OpenAI and Anthropic can't sell usage of their models for quite as high, because if there's a maybe slightly worse, in some ways just as good alternative that's free, most people are going to opt for this, and so this will cut revenue from their competitors. And I imagine that they probably don't intend to make that much money with these models. They just want to stay as like a big tech firm. There are ways you can monetize open source software, including these models. So if people build systems on top of them, maybe they could offer like paid support, or I can't quite remember other things off the top of my head. I think this to me seems to be what they're doing. There's certainly other speculation out there of what their goals are with this. That's a good question. Any other questions on the big labs? No? Okay, let's move on then to the government groups. Okay, so first up we have the UK AI Security Institute, formerly the UK AI Safety Institute. And so this is an organization within DCIT, and they are basically doing AI safety research on behalf of the UK government. And this was founded a couple of years ago. They're very heavy into their evaluations, so they do a lot of stuff on misuse, a lot of evaluations on like how risky these models might be. But beyond this, they also think about AI control a lot. They've got an alignment team. They're also thinking about societal resilience and human influence, to what extent these models can like persuade and convince people of stuff. So they're having like a very broad approach in trying to understand and mitigate the risks from AI. And it seems like their rough goals is sort of being a sort of global leader in AI safety, at least in terms of government organizations, and really trying to allow for global coordination and cooperation, but also still enable innovation within the UK on AI. And roughly their safety approach is just doing broad range of evals, some research, and trying to coordinate internationally. For some of their recent publications, model on trying to improve how LLMs are evaluated. They had released a benchmark, RepliBench, on how easy it is for models to sort of like autonomously self-replicate. This is similar to the RAA benchmark by Meta. And they also published a paper on how to evaluate control measures for AI agents. So this really it's like near-term practical thinking of like, if we're going to implement control for AI agents, how can we best do this, and how can we have a good scientific understanding of how effective these things are. So there's also the US AC, and so this is a US government AI Safety Institute within NIST. It was also founded a couple of years ago, kind of following the founding of UK AC. And they mostly seem to care about laying out AI safety standards, doing some model evaluations, and they also come up with testing frameworks. Compared to the UK AC, they're doing a lot less. I think they're it seems like they're a much smaller organization. And overall, it seems that they sort of care about safe AI deployment, and they want more collaboration between the government and industry. However, their sort of approach to this is voluntary standards, so not necessarily forcing regulation on these companies, but instead like having industry collaborate with them, which we'll see is kind of in a bit of contrast to the EU way of doing things in a moment. And some of their recent publications, they wrote a blog post on evaluating AI agent hijacking. They laid out some guidelines for managing misuse risk, and they also did some pre-deployment evaluations of OpenAI's O1 model. Now, for all the previous orgs, I've sort of taken some mixture of like recent and important publications, whereas these for USAC, these are, I think they're basically their most recent ones. So they're a bit behind the curve on their evaluations, because we're quite far past O1 now. So it's not clear going forward how much of an impact the USAC will really have. Okay, next up is the EU AI Office. So this is the European Commission's AI Act regulatory body. It was established last year. And so they are primarily focused on AI regulation compliance, enforcing these regulatory standards, and coming up with technical standards. And so their goals is roughly AI compliance with European values and rights. And I think this last bit is actually one way they differ quite strongly to other companies. A lot of the other companies and organizations are more focusing on like safety and risk, whereas the EU AI office is very explicitly about we want AI to conform to like the values of the people of Europe, and we want these AI systems to like respect human rights. And so you could argue that in some way they're going a step further beyond just the risk minimization standpoint. And so their safety approach is more mandatory regulatory compliance as opposed to US AC's voluntary. And yeah, as I said before, this like human rights-based approach. And so some of their recent publications, well, there's the EU AI Act. However, the EU AI Act was drafted mostly before the large language model boom. And so it was primarily focused on targeting narrow AI systems and like categorizing narrow AI systems into various risk levels. As they are now going to release soon this general purpose AI code of practice. The third draft of this has recently been published. And so this is sort of an amendment, an update to the EU AI Act that clarifies how this regulation applies to these more general purpose AI systems, such as large language models. Okay, there's also some other AI safety institutes around the world. So in Canada, Australia, Japan, and Singapore. A few other countries as well, but I think these are the maybe more well-developed ones, like well-developed ACs. And so yeah, these are like national AI safety research and policy development. And I think these institutes maybe have more of a concern about the capabilities of the nation that they are from, as well as like contributing to global governance. So a lot of these are much more like pro-innovation and really more about upgrading the ability of their sort of parent countries' economy to like utilize AI effectively. And so the safety approach is sort of a bit of a mix, mostly trying to balance this like innovation within the country with some risk management. Contrast this to UK AC, which is very much like trying to do a lot of good safety work. Yeah, any questions on the government organizations? All right. Okay, so let's move on to some of the broader agendas and smaller organizations. So I'm structuring this slightly differently. I'm going to go through each agenda and then talk about companies that are operating within that agenda. If you want to play a fun game, try and guess the name of the companies based on their logos before they come up. Okay, so alignment. Yeah, alignment is basically about making these systems do what we want, have them lead to good outcomes. And so of the big labs, OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Anthropic, and the UKAC are kind of pretty interested in this. The others maybe less so. But there's also the Center for Human Compatible AI, or CHAI, and their focus is really provably beneficial AI. This is Stuart Russell's group. If you've heard of cooperative inverse reinforcement learning, that's sort of where this came from. And so the idea is really you capture in the loss function everything that you care about, and you prove that minimization of this loss function leads to good outcomes. And this is sort of the flavor of alignment they're going after. And this is quite different from prosaic alignment, which is just get lower loss on your like RLHF data set. But you don't have this notion that like minimal loss on your RLHF data set is like provably beneficial. You're just like, oh, it's just on the margins better. Whereas CHAI are much more fundamentalist in this regard. There's also the MIT Algorithmic Alignment Group, which is Dylan Hadfield-Mennel's group. And they're really looking at human AI interaction and value learning. So this is much more on the prosaic alignment side, RLHF, reward modeling, this kind of stuff. And really these are the guys, or one of the academic groups that were exploring this before the big labs started to take it up. Okay, moving on from alignment, we've got evaluations. And so from the The big groups, it's pretty much all of them are doing evals. And evals is really about communicating to governments and regulatory bodies what the current state of AI is. If you're working on evals, you're really you'd only really do this if you believed in technical governance approaches or in governance approaches. If you think that big governments are not going to have much of an impact in the way AI is going, you wouldn't really bother doing this. Okay, so what are some of the companies in here then? We've got Meta, and they primarily focus on evaluating agent capabilities and the ability for models to do autonomous R&D. There's Apollo Research, who are very concerned about scheming and deception and are trying to publish evaluations in this area. There's Far AI, who are doing a lot of red teaming and also looking at trends within models. There's the Center for AI Safety, who are doing a very diverse range of dangerous capability evals, so biological weapon uplift, cybersecurity uplift, all this kind of stuff. They also have a very interesting paper on the emergent values in large language models called utility engineering. I think it's a very, very interesting paper. Go check that out. There's also Palisade Research, who again doing dangerous capability evals, but they're primarily focused on cyber offense. A few of these companies will come up again later. This is just what they're working on within the space of evals. Some of them do other things. Okay, interpretability. We've not really talked much about interpretability in this course. I think there's sort of two broad flavors of it. There's one which is, try to look at model internals and use white box methods in order to do something else better. And there's maybe a stronger view of it, which is, no, if we dig deep enough into the models and how they behave, we might be able to reach some more fundamental understanding of how these models are reasoning and how they're thinking. And this would be a massive scientific advancement. And so some of these companies sort of vary on which end of this scale they're on. So the big labs, Anthropic, DeepMind, and OpenAI are doing interpretability work. OpenAI is sort of less so nowadays, but they have done some in the past. Anthropic are pretty big on interp. Apollo Research again, they have done some work on looking at model features and some work on deception probes. And so the deception probe stuff seems very much, use interpretability to help with something else. They care about model scheming and trying to deceive us. They're like, okay, let's investigate some white box methods for detecting this. And also Far AI again, who've also done some work on looking at model features. So features are, for those who don't know, is the sort of concepts and the ways in which the sort of the concepts the model is reasoning about. So maybe you have a piece of text, there might be a feature for what language is the text written in. And so Apollo and Far are doing work on trying to figure out what features do models reason with, what sort of features of the world are they paying attention to. And so Far AI have done some of this stuff and then applied it to planning. So they showed how playing Soccerban, which is this game where you sort of move around blocks on a grid and you have to try and not get stuck, and you've got to move the blocks to be in certain locations. They showed that if you train models to play Soccerban and then you do some interpretability on them, you can actually show how they sort of plan out the moves they're going to do as the model plays the game. And they've also released some interpretability benchmarks for better evaluating interpretability tools themselves. Arc, I think Arc are, compared to Far AI and Apollo, much more on the end of really wanting to use interpretability to figure out how models think and sort of figure out what are the algorithms models are using. And so they have this research agenda of eliciting latent knowledge. How do you figure out the things that the model knows? And they also have this notion of heuristic explanations. So sort of patterns and sort of circuits in the model that allow you to explain its behaviors. Finally, we've got Leap Labs. This is maybe a more industry-focused company, and they're using interpretability for data discovery. So it's this nice idea of if you have some data set, you want to know, you want to learn things about that data set, what you can do is you can train an AI model on that data, and then you can do interpretability on that AI model. and the things that your interpretability can tell you about that AI model, you can sort of extend that understanding and knowledge back to the original data set. And so it's almost using AI as this sort of like intermediary just to like understand your data. Yeah, some people have thought about this more broadly in the context of advanced AI. This might be called like microscope AI. Yeah, okay. AI control, which we talked a lot about on Wednesday. So of the big players, the UK AC is very interested in control. Google DeepMind is doing some control stuff. Anthropic isn't at the moment. However, they do seem pretty keen to start using these methods in the near future. As for actual companies, there's Redwood, who are the main people driving control. There isn't really any other companies working on control at the moment. However, there are a large number of independent researchers, and for a sort of subfield that's about a year old, it's maybe not too surprising that there aren't many big companies who are establishing themselves as working on this thing. But I imagine if I was to give this lecture in a year's time or 2 years' time, there'd be many more names on this list. Okay, theory and fundamentals. So some people maybe have this attitude to AI of like, well, it's we're going to struggle to understand it. It's doing all this like crazy deep learning optimization magic. Let's not worry about that. Let's just like evaluate how it behaves. Let's just like try and get it to satisfy human preferences. But then there's another group of people who are like, no, if we really dig into what's going on here, if we really think long and hard about these questions and apply advanced mathematics to them, maybe we can make much more progress in understanding how these systems work. And so Google DeepMind and to a lesser extent Anthropic seem kind of interested in this. As for other companies, MIRI, which is the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, has historically spent a lot of time thinking about mathematical and theoretical approaches to alignment. However, they're not really doing this anymore. There's also Team Shard, who are the primary proponents of shard theory. And shard theory is a sort of theory of how agents work internally. They're composed of these like different agentic shards, and each shard sort of like wants a different thing, and they're all sort of like vying for control of the greater agent. I think it's like a very very interesting theory, and they're trying to do some work on that to investigate how to what extent it's true and to what extent it allows us to predict behaviors of these systems. And then finally here we have Timaeus, and so Timaeus are really big on singular learning theory and its applications to deep learning alignment. And singular learning theory is essentially a very bright mathematician took some geometric algebra and some analysis, and he applied this to deep learning problems where conventional computational statistics math sort of breaks down because you have these like singularities. And so he developed this like singular learning theory, and then Timaeus sort of company formed around this to try and cash this theory out in progress towards alignment and understanding of models. Okay, policy and governance. There are a lot of groups who are trying to influence the sorts of decisions that governments make. This is only really something you would bother doing if you thought governments are going to play a big role in AI. And of the big players, pretty much all of them except Meta are kind of interacting with the policy and governance sphere and trying to coordinate things on a more global governmental scale. As for specific organizations, a big one is GovAI. They are publishing reports and recommendations to governments on the governance of AI systems and how to internationally coordinate on AI safety. The next I'm going to talk about together, so that's CSET and RAND. And these are both American organizations that are very concerned about the national security for the US implications from AI. And RAND is also interested a bit more broadly about AI safety. And so they publish lots of reports and policy recommendations on these topics. CSET does a huge range of other things beyond AI that is also still mostly national security focused. We also have the Centre for Long-Term Resilience, CLTR, which is a UK-based organization, and they are primarily worried about extreme risks. And they think that AI is one of these extreme risks. They've also done some work on global pandemics. Yeah, and they're trying to do some research here and influence policymakers. There's also the totally different Centre on Long-Term Risk, CLR, with centre spelled differently because this is an American organization. And they're not concerned about extreme risks, including from AI. They're concerned about worst case risks from AI, which is probably ends up being very similar. And so yes, they're another sort of think tank body that are trying to coordinate with governments and policymakers on the potential extreme impacts from AI. Okay, then there's just some miscellaneous work that miscellaneous organizations that didn't really fit into any of the previous agendas. We've got FAR AI again. In addition to their evals and interpretability work, they do a lot on robustness, how the robustness of models scales as you make them larger, and also adversarial strategies against models. So they showed this superhuman Go playing model, Catago, and they showed that if you specifically try and beat Catago, you can actually win with a much weaker and less powerful model. Pardon me. However, this weaker model would get beaten by a normal amateur Go player. But what was actually even more interesting about this was that humans could replicate the strategy of their adversarial model against Catago and beat the superhuman Catago model. And I think this is really a testament to how even in a very constrained, very sort of clean domain of Go, this board game, models which get really good do have very large blind spots that are exploitable even by humans. Moving on, we have Epoch AI. They are sort of investigating and forecasting AI trends, compute usage, data usage, these sorts of stuff, really trying to predict, what is the future going to look like? Where are we going to be in 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years? Meridian again, but now they've moved away from their sort of mathematical fundamental research, and they're now much more interested in technical governance and field building. So similar to sort of the previous, similar to the organizations on the previous slide, they are more about trying to advise governments on handling AI risk. We also have conjecture work on cognitive emulation, which they bill as a safer alternative approach to AI. I don't really know what cognitive emulation means. They're very secretive about this. They have a very strong policy about not telling people the sorts of things they're working on. So if you're interested in cognitive emulation, you're going to have to get a job there and see if they tell you. Yeah, we'll see where they go in a few years. Maybe something good will come of it. We also have the Centre for AI Safety again, and they do a lot of stuff on safeguards. They published this paper on circuit breaking. This idea that if you train a model in a certain way, you can cause jailbreaks to sort of be sort of circuit broken and sort of hit some internal state in the model where the model stops doing anything at all. There's also CHIA, the Centre for Human-Inspired AI, which is a interdisciplinary community here in Cambridge, and they're kind of focused on AI benefiting humanity and this sort of human-AI sort of interface collaboration. Although their work covers an extremely broad range of topics. And then finally, we have Meridian, which is a Cambridge-based AI safety co-working space, and they helped us with putting on these lectures. So people who are in Cambridge and want to work on AI safety, always welcome to come visit Meridian. Yeah, any questions on any of those research agendas or organizations?
Go back to the governance.
Yeah.
I understand that UK and US, I see, they are having their own in-house set of experts or even labs.
Yeah.
But once they are working on something much broader, then do they take the advantage of some third parties who would provide the labs?
Yeah. So they've got a lot of in-house experts, but I think they're also trying to collaborate with individuals from the big labs on top of this. So Yeah.
And I understand that the Center for Long-Term Resilience, the Center on Long-Term Risk, they are just advisory, right?
Yeah, they're think tanks. So they do a lot of more sort of qualitative research and publish policy recommendations and big documents asking governments to do certain things. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions on anything today? Okay. All right. So to recap, there are a very broad range of organizations and a lot of resources going into AI safety. However, this is stepping back a much smaller piece of the overall AI investment pie. And the big AI companies are trying, and I would say succeeding, to build very powerful and transformative AI systems. And they have varying levels of investment and care when it comes to safety. There are also a few large government bodies which are conducting AI safety research, regulating AI, primarily the UK, the US, and the EU. And then finally, there are a large number of smaller organizations working on a very diverse range of agendas, all trying to do lots of different stuff, all based on maybe different models about how the future will go and like what is important to work on and these sorts of things. All right, thank you for listening. Any questions?